With the advanced bracing would be about $28,000 to $30,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my.
How does a delicate piece of wood from the 1700s, a paper comic book, or a mechanical watch survive decades without a single scratch? In high-stakes collecting, mint condition isn't just a label, it's the holy grail. Today on Antiques Roadshow, we're opening the vault on items that defy the laws of time. These aren't just old relics, they are pristine time capsules. We'll break down how untouched finishes, original packaging, and zero wear turned forgotten family heirlooms into shocking fortunes. Stick around to see why keeping an antique exactly as it was created pure gold.
This watch, I think easily today at auction, would be $35,000 to $45,000 in the condition it's in.
That's a big surprise. Well, that's great.
I haven't seen a Rolex moon phase in the 10 years I've been filming Antiques Roadshow walk-in, so it's nice that you brought one in. I've been waiting for one, and you brought it in, so I appreciate that.
The next item tells a very different story. Because not every antique becomes a fortune simply because it's old. And sometimes just a few small changes can dramatically affect an item's value.
It came to me from my grandmother. It's been in her family forever.
This table had been passed down through generations. The family always knew it was old, but no one truly knew just how old it was. That changed when the experts took a closer look.
If I told you that it is actually made in Pennsylvania around about 1750,
That would probably fit.
that would work?
It probably would.
Okay, great. Well, it does.
Okay.
So it's a Pennsylvania table made in the George II style.
Around 1750. In other words, this table existed before the United States was even founded. At that point, many people would expect an impressive appraisal to follow. But the story quickly took a different turn. The experts discovered that the tabletop had been refinished.
The top has been refinished.
In the world of antique furniture, that's far from a minor detail. For serious collectors, originality is almost everything. The more closely the appraiser examined the piece, the more signs of alteration began to appear. It wasn't just the tabletop. Even the current feet were no longer original to the table.
The feet on this don't belong there.
That has been a question. I have seen some that didn't have the feet.
They'd call this a snake leg with a pad foot, and that's been added. Put on sometime in the Victorian times, probably around about 1880, just to jazz up the table, just to really make it a little more interesting. And you could actually just take them off if you wanted to. Now comes to the value. So with American furniture, more than many other categories, condition.
Right.
We know the table has been restored. If I were to see this come up for auction, I would expect a value of around about $1,500 to $2,500.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
If the top was not refinished and the table were in great shape, it would be around about $4,000 to $6,000.
Because of those changes made over the years, the table's value had been significantly reduced. And that's a lesson many antique owners never expect to hear. Sometimes the thing that hurts an antique's value isn't age. It's the well-intentioned effort to make it look newer. The table was still a remarkable survivor from the mid-18th century. But this appraisal revealed an important truth. Condition can be just as important as age. And in some cases, preserving history matters far more than restoring appearance. Not every unusual detail on an antique reduces its value. When the owner bought this chest of drawers, he became concerned because the drawers appeared to be constructed from pieces of reused timber. He worried that the furniture might have been altered or repaired at some point in the past, but that very detail was exactly what caught the expert's attention.
I bought it 6 years ago in Stowe, and I was a little concerned when I got it home to notice that the drawers seemed to be made out of recycled pieces of timber. I wondered whether it's entirely original.
The experts quickly confirmed that these were not later replacement pieces. The timber had been reused when the chest itself was originally made, a practice that was not unusual in 18th century English cabinet making. However, the true source of those boards was far more remarkable. They had once belonged to an interior that was significantly older than the chest itself. And when the second drawer was opened, that hidden history finally began to emerge.
Well, you should see the second drawer is even more interesting, in as much as it's more brightly coloured.
That's fantastic. These panels were 150 years old.
The panels had once formed part of a room dating from the Tudor or early Elizabethan period in the 16th century. Generations later, they were reused inside a chest of drawers already more than 200 years old, turning an apparently ordinary piece of furniture into an object containing several different layers of history. Yet even that was not the discovery that excited the expert most.
And I've seen sometimes some decorations have pigment. We know that they used to paint a lot of furniture in the 1540s through to the 1580s. But never have I seen the pigment.
The rarest feature was the survival of the original pigment, preserved in remarkably pure condition after more than 4 centuries. Traces like these rarely survive, making it possible for experts to imagine the appearance of a Tudor room hundreds of years ago. By this point, only one question remained. What were those ancient panels actually worth?
And that won £1,000.
It surprised me.
It's very exciting. Very exciting.
The 2 historic panels alone were valued at approximately £2,000, far more than the owner had expected when he purchased the chest. A piece of furniture more than 280 years old had accidentally preserved timber almost 2 centuries older than itself. That unexpected discovery transformed the chest into one of the most impressive and memorable stories ever featured on Antiques Roadshow.
The violin belonged to my grandfather, who I never knew. He was my mother's father, and they were from the hills of Pennsylvania. She called them Pennsylvania hillbillies. And he died when she was 2 years old, so she never knew me.
Some family objects are kept because everyone clearly remembers the person who once owned them. But this violin was different. It belonged to a grandfather the guest never met. Even more painfully, the guest's mother barely had any memories of her own father because he died when she was only 2. So this violin was never just an old instrument. It was one of the few traces left from someone who had almost disappeared from the family's living memory. But as the case began, no one was quite sure where the real value was hiding. The family had heard that sometimes the bow can be worth more than the violin itself, and the bow that came with this instrument looked unusual enough to make that possibility feel real. Then came the first reversal. The bow was almost worthless. Its wood was imitation snakewood, fancy looking, but not the kind of bow collectors would chase. And that is when the appraiser turned back to the violin. The thing that seemed like just Grandpa's violin was actually the part worth studying. The violin was identified as being from around 1920, from Markneukirchen, Germany, a major center of violin making. It was not a rare Italian masterpiece, but it was a high-quality commercial violin, possibly from the Ernst Heinrich Roth Company or a similar good firm. The one-piece maple back had beautiful flame, the shaded finish looked well done, the scroll and detail work also showed more serious craftsmanship than a cheap student instrument. But the biggest surprise was the condition. Even though it had barely been played since 1921, the violin had no major problems that would collapse its value. With proper cleaning and setup from a violin shop, it could return as a real playable instrument. So how would the violin of a grandfather the family barely knew actually be valued?
If this were cleaned up, properly set up by a violin shop, I think you'd see it for sale in a violin shop for about $3,500, maybe $4,000. You look stunned.
I am. I am.
And you thought this was better than that.
It's just Grandpa's violin. My mother would be proud.
$3,500 to $4,000. Not the biggest number in the violin world, but for a family instrument once seen as old and disheveled, it was a beautiful twist. The most memorable part was the guest's line, "It's just Grandpa's violin." After the appraisal, the word "just" no longer felt small. This was the violin of a grandfather who died too soon, one of the few things left to show the family that music had once been part of his life. The bow had fooled the eye. But the violin was the part truly worth keeping. EUGÈNE LANCERAY Russian bronze Cossack equestrian sculpture. Continuing the countdown is a Russian bronze sculpture showing a powerful Cossack warrior on horseback. But what makes this piece special is not only the quality of the sculpture. Behind it is a family story from early 20th century St. Petersburg, when the owner's great-grandfather faced a serious conflict inside his factory.
My great-grandfather ran a cotton mill in St. Petersburg. In the early 20th century, there were a lot of industrial strikes, and he was forced in 1905 to intervene in a dispute between the workers and management over the working hours. The normal method of resolving disputes in those days was to send the Cossacks in.
At that time, Cossacks were often used to control industrial strikes. But instead of solving the problem through force, Joseph Hadfield made a different choice. He worked to create communication between the workers and management, and that decision transformed the image of the Cossack soldier into a completely different symbol.
And he set up a workers' council to mediate and to reinstate the workers' rights.
And here we have the plaque along the front that says, "You did without them."
The words, "You did without them," changed the entire meaning of the sculpture. It was not celebrating the use of power. It remembered a moment when conflict was avoided. Artistically, the sculpture is connected to EUGÈNE LANCERAY, known for his work showing cavalry, animals, and life in the Russian Empire. The details of the rider, clothing, and movement of the horse show the quality of a high-level bronze casting.
So when he retired in 1907, he was given that.
I see, and there's actually a plaque on the back presented to Joseph Hadfield, your great-grandfather, Esquire, by the Office and Hospital of the Nevsky Cotton Mills.
The inscription on the back confirmed the family history and created a special provenance for the sculpture. However, one detail directly affected its value. Before bringing it to Roadshow, the owner polished the bronze surface, accidentally removing part of the original patina that collectors highly value.
It's not necessarily a good thing to do with antique bronzes. It takes away the original patina, which does sadly affect the value. Which brings us neatly onto the question of their worth. This one is probably in the region at auction of £2,000 to £4,000.
Although polishing reduced its market value, it could not remove the history behind the piece. This sculpture does not only represent a Cossack warrior, it tells the story of a moment when dialogue was chosen instead of conflict. More than a century later, the message behind this gift still remains. If someone told you that your baby's changing table would one day be worth hundreds of times what you paid for it, you'd probably think they were joking. But that's exactly what happened in this story, and the best part is that the family had no idea what they were buying. In the late 1960s, a young couple stopped by an antique store in Minnesota. The owner was clearing out his inventory and made them a simple offer that seemed impossible to refuse.
He said we could have any one we wanted for $25.
For just $25, they brought this sideboard home. Not because they collected antiques, not because they knew it was rare, and certainly not because they recognized the maker. They simply needed a sturdy table that could serve as a changing table for their first baby, and this old piece happened to fit the job perfectly.
We bought it so that we would have a change table for our firstborn baby.
For years, the sideboard quietly became part of everyday family life. It witnessed ordinary moments, raised children, and served a practical purpose without anyone giving it a second thought. Then one day, someone noticed the labels attached to the back. Suddenly, one name changed everything: STICKLEY. Among collectors of early 20th century American furniture, STICKLEY is considered one of the defining names of the arts and crafts movement, a style that celebrated honest craftsmanship, quality materials, and timeless design over elaborate Victorian decoration.
The arts and crafts movement, which came over from England, sort of was really established in upstate New York by Stickley.
As the experts examined it more closely, they realized this was not just a useful old sideboard. It was an unusually well-preserved example of Stickley craftsmanship. The original quarter-sawn oak panels had survived. Even more impressive, most of the original finish was still intact. For collectors, that kind of originality can make all the difference, because every untouched surface helps prove the piece has not been over-restored or stripped of its history.
What's really lovely about this piece is that the finish is almost completely original.
Only then did the family's $25 purchase begin to reveal what it was truly worth. The same piece that once held baby supplies was now being viewed as a serious collectible.
I can tell you $25 was a very good investment. If I were to see this come up for auction today, I would expect to see an auction estimate of between around about $3,000 and $5,000.
Okay, well that's exciting.
From a baby's changing table to a piece of furniture worth between $3,000 and $5,000. Not the highest appraisal in today's video, but certainly one of its most satisfying surprises. Because sometimes the most valuable object in a home is not the one locked away for safekeeping. It's the one that has been used, loved, and taken for granted every single day.
Well, I ran a toy shop, didn't I, Claire,
Yes.
in Devon. And an old lady came one day and said to me, would I like to buy her? Because she felt she ought to get rid of her before she died and give her a good home. I paid her what she asked, which was £100,
Yes.
which I thought was a lot at the time.
100 pounds, around 1,975 was not a small amount of money. But when the expert looked more closely, he realized this was not just an ordinary doll. It belonged to Kammer and Reinhardt, the famous German doll manufacturer, and this particular model was commonly known as either Hansel or Gretel.
They're known as either Hansel or Gretel.
Yes.
By the manufacturers, who are Kammer or Kammer, with an umlaut on the A, and Reinhardt.
The numbers on the back of the head worked almost like the doll's identity card. Mold number 114 identified the face, while the number 49 gave the size. But the value was not only about age. Condition mattered just as much. The nose was slightly rubbed, there were a few small scratches, and the shoes were not original. Still, the cheek color was good, the painted blue eyes were strong, and the original dress was still there. That one detail about the eyes could have doubled the value, and that's what makes an appraisal so fascinating. Being old is not always enough. A small variation, a condition detail, or one original accessory can completely change the final number.
Now, had she glass eyes, she'd be probably worth double. It's quite extraordinary. It's probably because they're rarer.
From 100 pounds to around 3,000 pounds or 3,500 pounds. A doll that was bought so it could have a good home eventually became a real family asset. And sometimes, an object kept out of kindness turns out to be the very thing that makes an entire family look at it in a completely different way.
Nice original dress. Not original shoes.
I made them.
You made them? Oh, well, very well made.
An auction of abandoned storage units rarely sounds like the place to uncover anything extraordinary. Yet thanks to one completely spontaneous decision by his mother, two ordinary-looking comic books became one of the most memorable discoveries on Antiques Roadshow. The remarkable part is that no one had any idea what was actually inside the box when they bought it.
And she said there were 2 boxes of comics, and did I want to have her bid on them? And I said, sure. And so she brought them home, and in the box were these 2 comics.
The entire box of comics cost just $24, then sat forgotten in the attic for years before finally being examined. Stories like this are surprisingly common in the comic collecting world. Many books that were once sold as inexpensive entertainment for children have become highly desirable collectibles decades later. And as soon as the appraiser looked through the box, 2 issues immediately stood out.
We have the Avengers #1 from September of 1963 and Avengers #2 from November of 1963. So the reason I chose these 2 comics is because right now the Avengers are very big in the public consciousness.
These are the first 2 issues of the Avengers, created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, the legendary team behind Marvel's golden era. Most importantly, the Avengers has hallmarks the beginning of the series, making it one of the books collectors most want to own. But another factor would have a major impact on its value: condition.
These are what we'd call very good. This one would be a very good minus. This one would be around a very good plus.
Right.
Kind of in that range.
Right.
Older comics are often damaged by folds, spine wear, or moisture, so copies that survive in attractive condition are significantly more valuable. Although these 2 books are not perfect, they still preserve what matters most: their place in Marvel history. Then came the moment neither the owner nor his mother ever expected.
At auction, in what we would consider unprofessionally graded condition, this would sell for around $450 to $550.
Really? Wow. That's really cool.
but Avengers #1. We estimate in this condition, it would probably sell at auction for between $4,000 and $6,000.
No way, you are kidding me.
From a forgotten box of old comics, one thoughtful purchase unexpectedly brought home a genuine piece of Marvel history. Its significance comes not only from its age, but from being the first chapter of one of the most successful superhero franchises ever created. Some objects are hard to place at first glance. Are they funny, frightening, historical, or just deeply strange? This figure is exactly that kind of piece. It is not merely an odd decorative statue. It is believed to represent Sir Geoffrey Hudson, a real figure from the court of Charles I and Queen Henrietta, and the story behind him is even stranger than the object itself.
He's an effigy of a real Sir Geoffrey Hudson,
the famous
17th century dwarf. And he was, Chris will tell you, 18 inches high.
He was originally 18 inches tall when he was in the court of Charles I and Queen Henrietta.
A real man, only about 18 inches tall, was said to have appeared at royal banquets by bursting out of an apple pie. It sounds almost made up, but it reflects a very unusual part of court culture at the time. Still, Sir Geoffrey Hudson was not only remembered as a court entertainer, his life was also connected with horsemanship, duels, the Civil War, and loyalty to the royal family.
Geoffrey Hudson was a very famous figure. He was born in 1619, died in 1682. He was a court favourite, as you say, of Charles I.
Charles I.
So the figure in front of them is not just grotesque decoration. It combines a real historical person, old stories, military symbols, and the imagination of the 19th century. The expert notices the armor, the matchlock gun, the unusual coat of arms, and even the Sphinx above. Not everything fits history perfectly, but that is exactly what makes it so fascinating.
If we look at him, he's very much a mixture of idea. And I think what we have here is a figure that represents a mixture of myth and mythology and reality. Fanciful figure coming to life in the guise of a real person.
That is the strongest idea in this case. Myth, mythology, and reality all living inside one strange figure. It is not contemporary with Sir Geoffrey Hudson, and it is not a royal relic from the 17th century. It is a 19th century curiosity, turning history into something decorative, bizarre, and unforgettable. And even though it is not as old as the person it represents, its value is still significant.
I think the date is certainly 19th century.
He has a centrepiece. He's a centrepiece in the pub.
So the maximum price, I would think, would be about sort of £3,000 as a 19th century curiosity with good historical background.
Around £3,000 for a grotesque 19th century figure with a strong historical background. It may not be a true royal artifact, but it is strange enough to become the centerpiece of a pub and rich enough in story to make viewers stop and look twice. Do you think the expert's valuation matches how unusual this piece really is? Most people assume that the cleaner and newer a sports collectible looks, the more valuable it must be. But game-worn memorabilia follows a very different set of rules, and this jersey is a perfect example. It was faded, heavily worn, covered in signs of use, and looked so unimpressive that the owner's wife once suggested it would be more useful as a cleaning rag than as something worth preserving.
What have you been doing with it?
It's been folded up inside a box in my closet at my parents' house. When I opened it up and my wife saw it, she was like, "Is that your high school football jersey?" And I, of course, told her no, and she was like, "We just need to turn that into a rag and use it to wipe down some of the furniture."
Fortunately, that never happened, because once the expert began examining the jersey, he quickly found details that collectors care deeply about. Details that have nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with authenticity.
This jersey, it's from around 1969, 1970,
okay,
which were prime years for Gale Sayers.
Okay.
Right down here, we have King O'Shea. This was the manufacturer. You also have the size, 46. That was Gale Sayers' size.
Piece by piece, the story started coming together. The manufacturing details matched the period, the tagging matched the team, and even the size matched Gale Sayers himself. Yet the strongest evidence wasn't found on the label at all. It was found in the condition of the jersey.
Now, as you can see, this jersey's pretty dirty.
Right.
There's a lot of sweat, there's a lot of blood, and There's a lot of repairs, team repairs. This jersey's been torn apart.
Right.
It's been through war, battles, more than one.
To an average person, those stains, repairs, and tears might look like damage. To serious collectors, they tell a completely different story because they prove that the jersey wasn't sitting on a shelf, it was on the field, surviving the punishment of real games.
Now, it does have some issues, okay? The 0 on this sleeve right here is missing, okay? That probably got torn off too, but that makes it better. That's what collectors want. That's what everybody wants.
Yeah.
That's the history.
That's the NFL.
That single statement captures the entire appeal of game-worn memorabilia. The tears, the missing pieces, the bloodstains, and the repairs aren't flaws to hide. They are the history collectors hope to find.
This jersey, I would estimate at least $20,000 to $30,000, Roger.
Oh my gosh. I'm glad my wife didn't turn it into a rag.
I am too, man.
Man.
What had once been mistaken for an old rag turned out to be a jersey worth between $20,000 and $30,000. And that's what makes this story so memorable. The very things that made the jersey look worn out were the same things that proved it had lived a real life on the field, transforming an old piece of fabric into a genuine piece of NFL history. Appeared to be a few ordinary secondhand books turned out to be an extraordinary piece of American literary history. Car boot sales are hardly the places where anyone expects to discover valuable books. Yet, from dusty cardboard boxes, one collector quietly assembled an Ian Fleming collection that would surprise even the appraiser. The most unexpected part? It all began simply because he liked the cover artwork.
So you're telling me you got all these from car boot sales?
Except for that one.
Oh, amazing. Why do you like Ian Fleming?
Well, I don't know. It's the artwork on the books. It was when I started collecting the paperbacks. I just found the artwork interesting.
Those striking paperback covers sparked a deeper interest in Ian Fleming, leading him to seek out first editions. In the world of rare books, however, age alone means very little. Value depends on the edition, the condition, and especially whether the original dust jacket has survived. But the collection's first surprise wasn't hidden inside a James Bond novel at all.
Ian Fleming liked to go to the West Indies, so there was a link, and Ian Fleming had read James Bond's book. In a way, what he did was he just grabbed his name and he used it.
Few people realize that James Bond was originally the name of an American ornithologist. Fleming borrowed that name for the secret agent who would become a global icon. As a result, the bird guide has become a collectible in its own right because of its direct connection to the birth of 007. Even so, the greatest value of this collection still came from the remarkably well-preserved first editions.
The unusual thing about the whole collection is that most of them are in just such beautiful condition.
Picking up at car boot sales, they tend to put them in cardboard boxes on damp ground, and the damp comes through like there's one or two.
Books found at car boot sales are often damaged by damp or missing their dust jackets, making high-quality examples extremely rare. As the appraiser added up the collection, one title still stood above all the others: Casino Royale, the novel that introduced James Bond to the world.
And if I said to you that recently it's been fetching between £5,000 and £7,000 at auction,
Never.
and you say you bought it at a boot sale?
Yeah.
A book purchased for less than £1 could now bring £5,000 to £7,000 at auction. Its value comes not only from Ian Fleming's name, but from being the first edition of Casino Royale, the book that launched the entire James Bond series, combined with its outstanding condition after decades of survival. What began as a fascination with book cover art ultimately became one of the most impressive James Bond collections featured on the program. Some belongings travel with a family for decades without anyone ever thinking of them as valuable. This trunk was one of them. It wasn't displayed in a museum, and it wasn't locked away like a luxury collectible. For years, it simply moved with the family from place to place, carrying memories more than anyone imagined it might be carrying value. Few people would have guessed that every time it was loaded onto a ship, packed for another journey, or stored away after another trip, its real story was quietly traveling with it.
It's something I've had since 1966, and it's traveled a lot with my parents. It's been across the ocean 6 times.
When the trunk arrived at Antiques Roadshow, the experts almost immediately realized this was not just an old piece of luggage. It was a Louis Vuitton steamer trunk from a time when the Louis Vuitton name was built around one thing: luxury travel trunks made for wealthy travelers crossing the world in style.
This is a wonderful example of a Louis Vuitton steamer trunk.
The checkered damier canvas pattern was introduced by Louis Vuitton in 1888, long before the famous LV monogram became one of the most recognizable symbols in fashion. And this was where the trunk became even more interesting. The original label was still there. The serial number was still there. The straps, hardware, and identifying details all helped confirm that this was an unusually well-preserved example. What impressed the experts most was not only the brand name, but the condition. After crossing the ocean 6 times and following the family through years of real use, the trunk still survived in remarkably strong shape. Then came the question everyone was waiting for. How much was this old travel trunk actually worth?
If I were to see this come up for auction today, I would feel very comfortable in saying that it would sell for around about $10,000. If we were to insure it, you would need to place an insurance value of $20,000 or more on it.
You made my weekend.
Around $10,000 at auction, and more than $20,000 for insurance purposes. A trunk that had long been treated as nothing more than old family luggage was suddenly worth more than many new cars. And that is what makes this story so satisfying. Sometimes the objects that follow a family through ordinary life are the very ones hiding the biggest surprise. This Louis Vuitton trunk was not just carrying clothes across the ocean. It was carrying a hidden treasure the family had been living with for decades. If the Colt revolver we just saw helped change the way wars were fought, the next item tells a very different story. A story about an obsession with precision. About one man who devoted his skill, time, and craftsmanship to chasing perfection down to the smallest detail. And somehow, the result sat quietly in a family collection for generations.
I got this gun from my grandfather. What I know of the gun is it was made in approximately 1850 by a man whose name was James Anthony.
This firearm was never intended for a battlefield. It wasn't designed to win a war. It was built for something entirely different. Absolute accuracy. The kind of accuracy that shooters spend years trying to achieve.
It's called a bench gun.
Okay.
And the reason was it was meant to be shot from a bench.
Okay.
Bench target shooting was a very precision form of shooting.
By the mid-19th century, precision target shooting had become a popular pastime. Many enthusiasts built their own firearms as a hobby, but very few reached the level of craftsmanship that James Anthony achieved here. The moment the expert examined the rifle, he knew there was something unusual about it. And it wasn't just the design, it was the condition. Because what he was looking at simply shouldn't have survived like this.
The most remarkable thing I find about this is the condition of the guns. I mean, they're pristine, they're new. I mean,
more than 150 years had passed. Yet the rifle looked as if it had left the workshop only yesterday. And the closer the expert looked, the more surprises he found.
he has silver-plated furniture, all the original finish, the engraved and silver-plated butt plate. He gold-banded in some places the breeches, and they also have platinum blowout plugs.
Silver, platinum, multiple interchangeable barrels, and nearly every original accessory still intact. At that point, this no longer felt like a simple firearm. It felt more like a mechanical work of art, a masterpiece created by someone who refused to settle for anything less than perfection.
I think at auction they could easily fetch between $10,000 and $15,000.
Okay. Wow.
From a forgotten family heirloom, the rifle had become a piece valued at $10,000 to $15,000. An impressive number. But perhaps the most remarkable part of the story wasn't the valuation. It was the fact that a largely unknown craftsman working in the mid-1800s had created something so extraordinary that it could still leave experts speechless more than a century and a half later. And the next story will take us far away from peaceful target ranges and into a battlefield where a single bullet may have changed one man's fate forever.
My father is a retired doctor, had many years practiced in Manhattan, and has had a great love for watches and clocks for all his life. He used to occasionally go to a pawn shop to see what was available, and he picked this up at a pawn shop on 3rd Avenue.
Do you know when he bought this watch?
My best guess is about 30 years ago. I think it's an aviator watch.
The first thing that makes this Longines stand out is something anyone can notice immediately: its unusually large size. But this was never designed just to make the watch look impressive. Every part of its appearance came from a very specific purpose. This is a Longines Aviator, a type of watch created during a period when flying was still one of the most demanding challenges in the world. Long before GPS and modern navigation systems existed, pilots had to rely on maps, compasses, time calculations, and mechanical instruments to determine their position in the sky. That is why aviation watches were built very differently from ordinary wristwatches. The dial had to be large enough to read quickly inside a cockpit. The numbers needed to be clear with strong contrast, and every functional detail had to be practical in difficult flying conditions. Longines aviation watches are also closely connected to the legacy of Charles Lindbergh, the pilot who completed the first solo non-stop flight across the Atlantic Ocean in 1927. From his own experience navigating long-distance flights, Lindbergh understood that knowing an aircraft's exact position was one of the biggest challenges pilots faced. That need helped inspire the development of specialized watches designed specifically for aviation. For collectors, the appeal of a watch like this is not based on precious materials or luxury decoration. Its importance comes from the fact that it was a real tool, created for an era when every long-distance flight still involved uncertainty, skill, and risk. Over the decades, many examples disappeared, were modified, or had original parts replaced. Because of that, finding one that still represents this important chapter in aviation history has become increasingly difficult. And perhaps the most interesting part is where this watch was discovered. It did not come from a famous aviation collection or a museum archive. It was simply found by someone who loved watches, sitting inside an ordinary pawn shop long before its historical significance was fully recognized.
Actually, I do. He paid no more than $100.
$100, 30 years ago?
30 years ago.
Okay. A watch like this on the retail market today probably would run around $12,000. It's a pretty rare watch. There aren't many of them around. And this
Really?
is, one of the first ones I've seen in the last 5 or 10 years.
Tell me what that connection might be.
Originally, the ring was actually a tie pin, and it was presented to my grandfather, the picture at the back there, who was Thomas Walker. He was a footman at Buckingham Palace, and he was a footman to King George V.
Right from the beginning, this story carried an extraordinary historical connection. The ring was not simply a family piece, but a personal object linked to the British royal family. In the world of antiques, a strong history of ownership can sometimes be just as important as the materials used to create an item.
Now let's move on to this rather, I have to say, worn box with gold tooling round the edge, and in the centre, an interesting little cipher. That little gold cipher tells me that is something that goes back, dare I say, to the Russian royal family, to the Tsar.
But the old presentation box beside it made the appraisal even more fascinating. A small detail that many people could easily overlook suggested a possible connection to one of the most famous royal families in European history.
Right, the brooch itself. The little leaves underneath, well, they're green gold. OK, well, let's have a little look at the brooch now. It's a monogram that tells me that this was made by a craftsman called Thielemann. And he was a craftsman who did work for, guess who? Peter Carl Fabergé.
Each detail of the brooch slowly revealed its true background. Beyond the sapphires and beautiful craftsmanship, the piece carried the mark of an artisan directly connected to Fabergé, a name regarded as one of the greatest symbols of Russian jewelry making.
It's in the original presentation case. It's in absolutely pristine condition. Subject to the affirmation of this connection directly through to the Tsar, or maybe to his mother, £8,000 to £12,000.
And the next item in today's countdown brings another surprise, as a brooch passed down through generations reveals that its sparkling stones are far more valuable than the family ever expected. Edward Donovan, Lepidoptera, watercolors. Could a collection of watercolor paintings of butterflies and insects be nothing more than old scientific illustrations? Or could they preserve an important chapter in the history of both science and art? When the owner brought these watercolors to Antiques Roadshow, no one expected such a small collection to tell such a remarkable story. But after only a few moments of examination, the expert realized these were far more than attractive illustrations.
This is quite an amazing collection. Where did you get them from?
I got them from an antiquarian book dealer in Petersfield.
Was this very long ago?
It was probably about 4 years ago.
Before photography became available, illustrations like these were one of the primary ways people documented the natural world. Every detail had to be accurate, from the delicate wings of a butterfly to every leaf surrounding it. But what impressed the expert was not only their scientific precision, the artistic quality of the paintings was equally remarkable.
Well, they are the most beautiful 1840s, 1830s watercolors, so detailed that they're absolutely immaculate. Not only are the butterflies fabulous, but the backgrounds and the leaves and the nettles and all the rest of it are just absolutely incredible.
These works represent a rare combination of scientific observation and artistic craftsmanship. Rather than simply recording different species, they bring each subject vividly to life in a way few natural history illustrations of the period could achieve. But the discovery took an even more exciting turn when the expert noticed a familiar name written across the pages.
Now, I noticed at the top it says Van Diemen's Land Lepidoptera, and I notice on this one it says Chinese Lepidoptera. Now, I do know of an author who did a book on Chinese Lepidoptera, and his name was Donovan.
That clue pointed to Edward Donovan, one of Britain's leading natural history illustrators. If these watercolors were truly connected to Donovan's published work, they represented far more than a beautiful collection of paintings. And when the owner revealed what had originally been paid for them, the biggest surprise finally arrived.
And we paid about £400.
Right. I think you better go and buy the others off him. I think you wouldn't sell them. No. Well, I think you're 22. It's such a pity to break them up in many ways, yeah. But you're 22 are worth in the region of £10,000.
Purchased for only about £400, this remarkable group of watercolors became one of the memorable discoveries on Antiques Roadshow. Their significance was measured not only by the estimated value of around £10,000, but by the way they preserved an era when art and science worked hand in hand to explore, document, and better understand the natural world. Not every treasured possession begins with a carefully planned search. Sometimes, an ordinary decision made decades earlier leads to one of the most memorable appraisals on the show. This set of prints has exactly that kind of story. What caught the expert's attention wasn't just the beauty of the images, but the history behind them.
They are Alphonse Mucha's The Four Seasons, spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And I've had them for the last 50 years. We paid $200 for them.
The moment the appraiser heard the artist's name, he knew these were far more than decorative prints. Alphonse Mucha was one of the defining figures of the Art Nouveau movement, celebrated for his elegant female figures and flowing decorative style. His work didn't just create beautiful images, it helped transform the way people experienced printed art at the end of the 19th century.
Alphonse Mucha was arguably the single greatest Art Nouveau artist of the year. In fact, Art Nouveau is often referred to as Le Style Mucha. They named the form after him, and this is sort of a masterwork of his artistry.
The Four Seasons was created as a series of decorative panels rather than a traditional advertising poster. At the time, lithographs like these made it possible for ordinary families to own artwork designed by a celebrated artist without purchasing an expensive oil painting. That was one of the reasons this series quickly became one of Mucha's most admired creations.
This was the first series of decorative panels that Mucha designed for the printer, and this series of decorative panels was so popular, all of a sudden people in Paris who hadn't been able to afford oil paintings were able to buy these lithographic paintings and decorate their homes relatively inexpensively.
As he continued examining the set, the appraiser noted that all four prints had remained together and were still in very good condition. Although they differ in some ways from the earliest impressions, that does little to reduce their appeal among collectors. Those observations ultimately led to the final valuation.
The Four Seasons in this kind of good condition at auction, I would estimate these four as a group between $12,000 and $18,000.
That's awesome. That is really awesome.
The appraiser estimated the complete set at $12,000 to $18,000 at auction. That value reflects not only Alphonse Mucha's reputation, but also the lasting influence of Art Nouveau, the early production date, and the fact that all four panels have remained together for more than a century. A collection that began with a simple newspaper advertisement ultimately became proof that an ordinary purchase can turn into an extraordinary discovery many decades later. Not every work of art is created for exhibition or to be sold to collectors. Sometimes it begins as nothing more than a heartfelt gift for a close friend. That is exactly what makes this drawing so special. More than a century later, the story behind it has become just as important as the artwork itself.
Jessie M. King was a friend of my grandmother.
Yes.
And from this poem, Jessie M. King decided to do this very nice drawing and named after my grandmother and gave my grandmother the pet name of Kilmeny at that time.
Right.
And gave the drawing to my grandmother.
What impressed the appraiser most was the drawing's almost perfect provenance. It was presented directly by Jessie M. King to its original owner, rather than passing through galleries or private collections. Jessie M. King herself was one of the leading figures of the Glasgow style, the artistic movement that helped bring Scottish Art Nouveau to international recognition.
What was so extraordinary about Glasgow at this period, at the turn of the century, was that, in a way, it was far ahead of other movements. They were the toast of Vienna. I mean, Vienna was blown away by this Glasgow style, what we know as the Glasgow style.
The appraiser also explained that the artwork was executed on vellum, a premium material that demanded exceptional precision. Its delicate penwork left virtually no room for correction, making every line a demonstration of Jessie M. King's remarkable skill. That craftsmanship is one of the reasons why her original drawings continue to be highly prized by Art Nouveau collectors.
It's not like paper where the light bounces off the surfaces here. It is almost translucent. And then the other thing, when by the time we start looking at this drawing, then we begin to really marvel at Jessie King, because we see this minute penwork. And we have to remember that she couldn't change anything.
Taking into account the artistic quality, the vellum support, the period in which it was created, and its remarkable ownership history, the appraiser concluded that the drawing deserved a significantly higher valuation than originally expected. Together, those qualities have given the piece lasting appeal among collectors.
I would be tempted to put £5,000 on it, but because it is such a beautiful, perfect Art Nouveau, Jessie King, I think that £10,000 is much more appropriate.
The appraiser ultimately increased the valuation to £10,000. Its value comes not only from Jessie M. King's reputation, but also from its direct provenance, its vellum support, and its classic Art Nouveau style. What began as a personal gift between two friends has become an outstanding example of the Glasgow style, and a work that many Art Nouveau collectors would be delighted to own.
It was actually my grandmother's guitar. She bought it from her brother right before he left for World War II, with the intentions of selling it back to him when he arrived back home, but a few things changed. She kept the guitar, passed it down to my father, and my father recently passed it to me.
This guitar entered the family almost like a temporary arrangement. A brother was about to leave for World War II. His sister bought the guitar from him, planning to sell it back when he came home. But life changed, the plan changed, and the guitar stayed. From the grandmother, it passed to the father, and then to the grandson. At first, it might have seemed like a family keepsake that had simply survived 3 generations. But once the appraiser checked the serial number, the story shifted fast. This was a 1933 Martin D18. This guitar had an Adirondack spruce top, mahogany back and sides, and an ebony fingerboard and bridge-the-right details for a serious D18 from that period. And when it was played, it still had the kind of sound the appraiser called world-class. But this case was not just a simple value reveal. There was a problem. The top had been refinished or overfinished, changing the color of the face and reducing its originality. To someone outside the collecting world, that might not sound too serious. But in vintage guitars, the original finish is a major part of the value. The guitar was still rare. It still sounded incredible. It was still a 1937 Martin D18, but one altered layer on the top was enough to make the market recalculate everything.
I think in the retail environment, this guitar would sell for somewhere between $15,000 and $18,000.
Wow. Wow. Nice.
If this guitar had nothing done to it, it would be worth approximately $35,000.
$15,000 to $18,000 was still a very strong number. But the real twist came next. If the top had never been altered, the guitar could have been worth around $35,000. One layer of finish had nearly doubled the difference. Still, this Martin had not lost its meaning. It was still the guitar the grandmother kept, the father played, and the next generation inherited. The condition may have lowered its market value, but its sound and family story remained completely intact. Not many people would postpone surgery just to attend a local auction, but that was exactly what this owner did after becoming convinced that something extraordinary was waiting for him there. At first, it was only a suspicion that he had spotted a design by Charles Eames. The moment he opened a drawer and found the original label, that suspicion became certainty. But that was only the beginning. The real story behind this cabinet was about to make it even more remarkable.
I actually postponed a hernia surgery to attend the auction. When I went to preview the auction, I suspected it was Eames, and then when I looked in the drawer, I knew it was. And so I sat through the whole auction, and I won the bid.
Charles and Ray Eames transformed the way America viewed modern furniture after World War II. Working with Herman Miller, they created designs that combined simplicity, functionality, and timeless style. This cabinet belongs to the Eames Storage Unit, or ESU, introduced in 1952 as a modular storage system that blended steel, wood, and colorful panels. Today, it remains one of the defining icons of mid-century modern design. Yet, the famous Eames name was not the only reason the appraiser became excited. A few seemingly minor details completely changed the story.
The cabinet is designed by Charles Eames for the Herman Miller Furniture Company. In the original catalog from 1952, it was known as the ESU series. ESU standing for Eames Storage Unit. This exact model was known as the ESU 420N.
What made this cabinet especially important was that it belonged to the first production series. Herman Miller soon redesigned the model because the original legs proved vulnerable during shipping. As a result, first series ESUs with their original legs, factory label, and outstanding condition have become exceptionally scarce. For collectors, that single detail is enough to transform both the rarity and the value of the piece.
The reason I know this is from between 1950 and 1952 is that in 1953, this entire cabinet was redesigned. This version, which was commonly referred to as the first series version, has these original legs.
Among mid-century modern collectors, originality is everything. An ESU that still retains its earliest components is considered far more desirable than one that has been altered or restored. By now, only one question remained. Was postponing surgery really worth it?
How much did you pay for it?
$15.
In 1952, there's few of them that survive in good condition. I would call this one of the best survivors I have ever seen. I think this would sell for about $20,000.
From a $15 auction purchase, this cabinet had grown into a $20,000 collectible thanks to its iconic design, rare first series construction, and exceptional preservation. Most people assume that the cleaner and newer a sports collectible looks, the more valuable it must be. But game-worn memorabilia follows a very different set of rules, and this jersey is a perfect example. It was faded, heavily worn, covered in signs of use, and looked so unimpressive that the owner's wife once suggested it would be more useful as a cleaning rag than as something worth preserving.
What have you been doing with it?
It's been folded up inside a box in my closet at my parents' house. When I opened it up and my wife saw it, she was like, "Is that your high school football jersey?" And I, of course, told her no, and she was like, "We just need to turn that into a rag and use it to wipe down some of the furniture."
Fortunately, that never happened, because once the expert began examining the jersey, he quickly found details that collectors care deeply about. Details that have nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with authenticity.
This jersey, it's from around 1969, 1970.
Okay.
Which were prime years for
Right.
Gale Sayers.
Okay.
Right down here, we have King O'Shea. This was the manufacturer. You also have the size, 46. That was Gale Sayers' size.
Piece by piece, the story started coming together. The manufacturing details matched the period, the tagging matched the team, and even the size matched Gale Sayers himself. Yet the strongest evidence wasn't found on the label at all. It was found in the condition of the jersey.
Now, as you can see, this jersey's pretty dirty.
Right.
There's a lot of sweat, there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of repairs, team repairs. This jersey's been torn apart.
Right.
It's been through war, battles, more than one.
To an average person, those stains, repairs, and tears might look like damage. To serious collectors, they tell a completely different story because they prove that the jersey wasn't sitting on a shelf, it was on the field, surviving the punishment of real games.
Now, it does have some issues, okay? The 0 on this sleeve right here is missing, okay? That probably got torn off too, but that makes it better. That's what collectors want. That's what everybody wants.
Yeah.
That's the history.
That's the NFL.
That single statement captures the entire appeal of game-worn memorabilia. The tears, the missing pieces, the bloodstains, and the repairs aren't flaws to hide. They are the history collectors hope to find.
This jersey, I would estimate at least $20,000 to $30,000, Roger.
Oh my gosh. I'm glad my wife didn't turn it into a rag.
I am too, man.
Man.
What had once been mistaken for an old rag turned out to be a jersey worth between $20,000 and $30,000. And that's what makes this story so memorable. The very things that made the jersey look worn out were the same things that proved it had lived a real life on the field, transforming an old piece of fabric into a genuine piece of NFL history.
This was my father-in-law's guitar, and he purchased it from his brother, who was a professional musician. I just know it's a 1938 Martin, and he played it all the time. He really enjoyed it. He didn't really play much professionally. He tried to do that. I think in the 30s, there's a picture someplace of him with George Goebel.
At first glance, this guitar does not look like a hidden treasure. It has no flashy custom color like a Fender, no gleaming hardware like a Gibson ES 355, and none of the elegant handmade presence of a D'Angelico archtop. It looks much simpler than that. Just an old acoustic guitar, played often, loved by its owner, and kept inside the family. But that simplicity is exactly what makes the twist so interesting. Because this was not just an ordinary acoustic guitar. It was a 1938 Martin D18. For bluegrass and folk players, especially those who understand vintage acoustics, the phrase pre-war Martin D18 carries real weight. These guitars are not admired because they look expensive. They are admired because of the sound, loud, clear, quick to respond, and strong enough to cut through mandolin, banjo, fiddle, and vocals in a string band. This guitar had an Adirondack spruce top with mahogany back and sides, a combination many players love for its strong, bright, balanced sound. But the most important detail was not something most people could see from the outside. It was inside the body. The bracing. On an acoustic guitar, bracing is like the hidden skeleton beneath the top. It controls how the wood vibrates, how the sound opens up, and how the guitar responds to every pick stroke. When the appraiser examined this Martin, he found advanced bracing, with the X-brace positioned closer to the sound hole. For a 1938 Martin, that detail matters a lot. The family thought the guitar might be worth around $5,000. And if you only saw it as an old wooden guitar, that guess might sound reasonable. But this was a pre-war Martin D18, with the right materials, the right structure, no heavy repairs, and the kind of sound acoustic players spend years trying to find.
But that's not a big deal, because in today's market, the replacement value of this guitar with the advanced bracing would be about $28,000 to $30,000.
Okay. Wow.
From an expected $5,000, the guitar suddenly climbed to $28,000 to $30,000. But the moment is powerful for more than the number. The man who owned it did not keep it as an investment. He played it, loved it, and let it live on inside the family. A 1938 Martin D18 does not need a dazzling appearance to be valuable. Its secret is hidden inside the body, in the sound, in the advanced bracing, and in the memory of a man who played it simply because he loved it. Very few children buy comic books expecting them to be worth as much as a car one day. Most simply read them, place them in a box, and move on. But sometimes, forgetting that box for more than half a century becomes the best investment decision its owner never intended to make. That is exactly what happened with this Marvel collection.
I bought them new when I was about 11 and 12 years old, and I put them in a box, and for the last 50-something years they've sort of sat in that box. I got inspired when Antiques Roadshow came to town, and I thought I'd bring them in.
The remarkable part was that he had purchased these comics during one of the most important periods in Marvel history. The early 1960s marked the Silver Age, when Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Steve Ditko created the superheroes that would form the foundation of the modern Marvel Universe. But not every issue carries the same value. Collectors look for key issues, comics featuring a character's first appearance or another major turning point in Marvel history. After only a few minutes of examination, the appraiser realized this box contained several of them.
Marvel's been around since the late 30s, originally as Timely Comics in the Golden Age. But it wasn't until 1961, with the birth of the Marvel Silver Age of comics, when it finally had to change from Atlas Comics to Marvel. And the first book that started it all was Fantastic Four #1 in November of 1961.
The standout was Fantastic Four #8, featuring the first appearances of Galactus and the Silver Surfer. It remains one of the most desirable key issues from Marvel's Silver Age. The collection also contained other important comics, but its condition after more than 50 years made the discovery even more impressive. That meant this collection was important not only because of the stories and characters it contained, but also because the books had survived in such strong condition.
We have Fantastic Four 36. Now, first appearance of the Frightful Four, but more importantly, the first appearance of Medusa. Fantastic Four 48 is your best book by far. In its current condition, the Fantastic 48 alone is a $2,000 to $3,000 comic.
Okay.
After examining only a small portion of the more than 100 comics, the appraiser already had enough information to estimate the entire collection. The most surprising part was that it had all started with 12-cent comics purchased by a young boy using his spending money.
Conservatively, at auction for the entire collection, I think you easily have $30,000 to $40,000 worth of comics here. So, times 100 at 12 cents a piece, I mean, what are you in, like 10 bucks all in, $12? I mean, that's not too bad of a return on your investment.
I didn't really think of it as an investment at 12, but I guess it was.
After sitting forgotten in a box for more than half a century, the collection was now worth between $30,000 and $40,000. It proved that childhood favorites can sometimes become part of Marvel history, and the most successful investments are occasionally the ones their owners never meant to make. The Paul Store Claret Jugs.
My husband bought them in the early 60s because we liked them. We paid £50 for them, which we thought was rather a lot in those days.
£50?
Yes.
Right, yes.
That is exactly how the story of these claret jugs began. In the early 1960s, the owner's husband bought them simply because they appealed to him. At the time, £50 felt like a considerable amount of money, but they were purchased for enjoyment rather than investment. For decades, they remained cherished household possessions. Then they arrived at Antique Roadshow.
The condition is absolutely stunning. I mean, everything is as crisp as the day it was made. The glassing is just so sharp.
The first thing that caught the experts' attention was their remarkable condition. The engraved details remained crisp. The glass was beautifully clear. Even the silver showed very little wear, preserving the sharpness and elegance of the original craftsmanship. And there was something else that made them especially desirable. They had survived together.
Finding a pair of claret jugs is unusual. They turn up, but most often you simply find a claret jug.
The vine decorations flowing from the lid to the base perfectly suited their original purpose, but the most important discovery was hidden in the hallmarks.
Well, they're made in London, and we've got a date here of 1838, but the maker really could not be better. The maker in this case is Paul Store.
With those words, the appraisal moved to an entirely different level. Paul Storr is widely regarded as one of the greatest silversmiths in British history, and his work remains highly sought after by collectors around the world.
One of the greatest of the silversmiths that has ever been.
Dated to 1838, preserved in exceptional condition and crafted by one of the finest names in silver, the pair was worth far more than the family had ever imagined.
We should be looking at a value of somewhere around 30,000 plus.
What? Wow, that's fabulous.
More than £30,000 for two pieces originally bought simply because they were admired. But the most touching moment came afterward.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, I do wish my husband was here to hear that.
It was a simple remark, yet it perfectly captured the heart of the story, because behind every valuable object is someone who chose to keep it. And in this case, it was proof that the owner's husband had an exceptional eye when he selected what would turn out to be a truly outstanding piece of silver.
Well, I inherited it from my grandfather. He had worn it when I was a little child. All the time that I knew him, he wore this watch. And it intrigued me just because of the moon phases, I think. When he passed, I inherited it. I took it in to a repair shop because part of it wasn't working. They indicated that it really wasn't worth fixing and that a new face had been put on it.
But what that repair shop did not realize was that this was not just another old Rolex. Hidden behind that small dial was one of the rarest and most unusual chapters in Rolex history. Today, most people associate Rolex with legendary sports watches like the Submariner, GMT Master, or Daytona. But before those models became global icons, Rolex briefly explored a completely different direction, creating complicated watches that focused more on traditional watchmaking craftsmanship. And the moon phase calendar was one of the most fascinating examples. This watch did much more than simply tell time. It combined a calendar display showing the date, day, and month with a moon phase complication that followed the cycle of the moon. This type of feature is usually associated with traditional high-end watchmakers, where the value comes not only from accuracy but from the mechanical artistry hidden inside. But what makes this Rolex even more interesting is how short its production period was. After only a limited time, Rolex shifted its focus toward tool watches designed for divers, pilots, explorers, and people working in demanding environments. That decision helped create the Rolex identity known around the world today. But it also made watches like the moon phase calendar incredibly uncommon. For vintage Rolex collectors, the smallest details can completely change the story. The case, serial numbers, dial condition, and originality are all examined carefully because each piece helps prove how much of the watch's history has survived. And that is where this example became complicated. Because in the vintage watch world, making something look newer does not always make it more valuable. An original dial with natural aging can sometimes be far more desirable than one that has been restored to look perfect. The fading, the small changes, and the marks left behind by decades of use are often exactly what collectors are searching for. They are proof of the watch's original journey. So even though this moon phase remained an extremely rare Rolex, the changes made in the past created a major difference that only serious collectors would truly understand.
This watch, I think easily today at auction, would be $35,000 to $45,000 in the condition it's in.
That's a big surprise. Well, that's great.
I haven't seen a Rolex moon phase in the 10 years I've been filming Antiques Roadshow walk-in, so it's nice that you brought one in. I've been waiting for one, and you brought it in, so I appreciate that. If it had a very strong dial, this watch could be $1 million.
Paul Storr Silver-Gilt Triton Shell Salt Cellars. Continuing the countdown are objects originally created for something as simple as holding salt on a dining table. But the moment the expert saw them, he realized these were not ordinary pieces of silverware. Because in the hands of an exceptional craftsman, even a small functional object can become a miniature work of sculpture.
I must say, these are really wonderful sculptural objects. There's very little else you can say except they are marvellous pieces of sculpture. They are, of course, salt cellars, in fact. It's what they were designed to do.
What makes these salt cellars special is the combination of function and artistry. They were designed for use during meals, but every detail, from the shells to the Triton figures and mythological sea creatures, was crafted with remarkable skill. And their true importance is connected to one of the biggest names in the history of English silver.
These were made by this very famous goldsmith called Paul Storr. 3 of them were made in 1813, and this one was made actually in 1811. And you can see a date letter Q there, as opposed to all the rest which have a date letter S for 1813.
Paul Storr was one of the most celebrated silversmiths of the Georgian period. His works are admired for their impressive designs, outstanding craftsmanship, and association with some of the most prestigious clients of the era. But what impressed the expert even more was that after more than 200 years, the quality of these salt cellars was still beautifully preserved.
The gilding on them is so wonderful, it's so thick and heavy, and just the quality of the work, everything is absolutely brilliant. They're not worn, all the chiseling on the little mermen here is absolutely brilliant. They are really tremendous, tremendous salt cellars.
From the thick silver-gilt surface to the tiny carved details on each figure, every element shows the skill behind their creation. These are not valuable simply because of the precious material. They represent history, design, and the work of one of the finest craftsmen of his generation. And that combination led to a valuation that completely surprised the owner.
If I had to buy these, either from a private house or at an auction or whatever, if I had to buy them, I think I'd have to be looking at £40,000.
Good Lord. You do surprise me.
From small dining objects, the Paul Storr salt cellars were revealed to be silver masterpieces worth around £40,000. Their value comes not only from the precious metal, but from the maker, the age, and the exceptional quality of the craftsmanship. Sometimes, an object created for the simplest purpose can become an important piece of art history.